Good morning, good to see you. I'm going to film a short video that will just give us an outline and, room to discuss, excuse me, with regards to the topic of inflation. And here's the first point. What do you understand by what inflation actually is? Can you come up with a succinct economics definition for inflation, excuse me, with a real life example? Now, what I'd like you to do is to come up with that. So if you could pause the video here, go away, get that, come back. Ready? Pause. Don't worry, I'm just waiting. Still waiting. Okay, so now that you know what inflation means, let's have a look at those key terms that we're going to have to understand, because inflation, we're going to decide, we're going to work out that inflation actually is considered to be the number 2 evil in the entire economy. Now, using the word evil is quite strong, so that's how you see what we're actually thinking, the degree of not niceness with regards to inflation. We're going to figure out why inflation is considered so bad. So key terms that we need to know. Yes, inflation. Have a really good definition for inflation. But under that, we also need to know what deflation means, what disinflation means, not the Jamaican version of inflation, what hyperinflation means. Bonus points if you can tell me what hyperinflation used to be called, and what stagflation means. So again, pause the video here, go find good economics definitions for deflation, disinflation, hyperinflation, and stagflation. Don't worry about me, I'll still be here when you get back. Ready? Go. Still here. Waiting. Come on, Professor, hurry up. All right, okay. So now you've got those key definitions down, and what you're probably likely to see then is each one is going to have a different effect on the economy. All right? You're still going to see that there will be eliminating purchasing power of consumers, but because you've got different rates with regards to it, so the difference between inflation and hyperinflation, for example, the rate at which that purchasing power is stripped away from consumers could actually be quite severe. And there are many examples around the world where that has actually happened. So why is it inflation is so bad? Right, that's the next part of this. You've seen that. So inflation we see as an evil. So what is its economic effects? What are the personal effects? Just like we did with unemployment. So marry those up and then start thinking, what about deflation? What are the effects of deflation? Are they as bad as inflation? Are they worse than inflation? What about hyperinflation? Does that just mean that those inflationary effects just take off? And that you certainly might feel that to be the case. Stagflation is a bit of a unique concept, and one that you really need to know at this point in history, because that's what we're worried about happening in the next little while. So, what are the effects of inflation? What are the effects of deflation? What are the effects of disinflation? Right. So if you can work out what are the major economic and personal effects of inflation and what are the major economic and personal effects of deflation, that's your next task. I know that's quite a bit, so we'll give you a little bit more time. So pause the video now. Now, gonna guess that Sherelle, you're gonna do, and you and Jonathan, probably going to do your revision over the weekend. But I would like you to have a look at this, just to see, right, what some of those effects are. So, I did give you a big hint, because it's about the pricing of things. So it's about the pricing of labor, it's about the pricing of goods and services, but it's also about the pricing of assets. So if the prices increase, it becomes more expensive. Your purchasing power disappears. What you're able to buy disappears. And then if the price of the asset rises, you may not be able to afford to go into the asset market, the housing market, for example. But if you own a house and the price goes up, even in inflationary terms, you could feel more wealthy. So that might be a good thing. But what happens to the savings in your bank account? Well, it turns out that because you're not using your savings currently, but they are planned for expenditure in the future, that you're actually going to see that amount decrease because it's going to be worth less to you. So if inflation is occurring, then you are robbing from the savers. What about the people borrowing money? Well, it turns out that because your money is worth less for you in the future because of inflation, that you're actually better off borrowing money. So creditors are going to do better in inflationary times. And so you might see people buying more because inflation. You might also see people buying more just with the expectation that inflation will occur. Also, we need to be a little bit careful as to what we understand with regards to inflation, because it could be just a small change. It could be just, inflation's gone up by 0.1%. Well, does that really matter? You could also discuss whether if it's just a small rate of inflation that has changed. Maybe people's incomes are big enough that doesn't really affect them very much. But if your incomes are lower, then it's going to affect you potentially more, particularly with those basic necessities that you need to live. So considering all of those, disinflation has said that's a reduced rate of inflation. So inflation is still occurring, it's just that the rate of inflation has fallen, right? The speed, right? So if you look at it on a graph, you can see inflation, then you can see disinflation, but it's not until it hits the zero and becomes negative that you could actually classify it as deflation. Then prices are actually falling. Now, favorite examiner question is to ask you about deflation instead of inflation, to check that your understanding of that. So it might be, to discuss the effects of deflation, or it might be, is deflation worse than inflation? Do we want the prices of our assets to decline with deflation? Is that better than the prices of the assets increasing? So those are questions that the examiner could ask. Now, there are going to be some quite significant government policies that will come into play. We know already that those two major policies, one is going to be called fiscal and the other is going to be called monetary. We're going to need to spend probably a little bit of time on the monetary side, looking at how it actually works. And that will be backed up with what you discovered when we went to Bank Negara. Okay? The fiscal policy, we kind of have an understanding of already, and we can see that. We're also going to be able to then link the idea of the objective about inflation with the objective about unemployment. We're going to see that those two link, because you're trying to get one side, but you might end up creating a problem on the other side. So you might be trying to solve unemployment and create inflation, or you might be trying to solve inflation and you create unemployment. And that's a problem that the New Zealander, Bill Phillips, looked at and analysed, and he came up with his own particular model with regards to that called the Phillips curve, and that's pretty cool. And we are going to analyse a Phillips curve. We're going to look at it in the short run, we're going to look at it in the long run, and there's a little bit of HL content that will be thrown into the mix. So this is just an introduction, okay? We're going to do a bit more depth, but getting those key terms and ideas down for a start is really crucial. I trust that you are having a good day. What we're going to do is we will have a catch-up session, okay? We'll have a catch-up session this week, maybe on Friday, once you've done the cognitive work and once you've figured some things out, and we'll see where you're at with regards to unemployment and these introduction concepts about inflation. So, keep safe, and as we'd say in the land of my birth, hei korera, which means goodbye for now.